Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome to the Gospel of Life. I'm your host, Leticia Velasquez. I would like to introduce you to a friend of mine, Sherry Antonetti, a fellow Catholic writer and mom of 10. Sherry's work has appeared in many Catholic publications, including National Catholic Register, Aletheia, Catholic Digest, Catholic Exchange, and she started with Catholic Mom. In addition to being the mom of 10, Sherry is the author of the Book of Helen and is working on a second book. Sherry can be found at the blog Chocolate for Your Brain. So before we talk about how Sherry lives the Gospel of Life, I'd like to start with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. O Mary, bright dawn of the new world, Mother of the living, to you do we entrust the cause of life. Look down, O Mother, upon the vast numbers of babies not allowed to be born, of the poor whose lives are difficult, of men and women who are victims of brutal violence, of the elderly and the sick, killed by indifference or out of misguided mercy. Grant that all who believe in your Son may proclaim the gospel of life with honesty and love to the people of our time. Obtain for them the grace to accept that gospel as a gift ever new, the joy of celebrating it with gratitude throughout their lives, and the courage to bear witness to it resolutely, in order to build together with all people of goodwill the civilization of truth and love, to the praise and glory of God, the Creator and Lover of life. Amen. Well, welcome, Amen. Sherry.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I've admired your writing here and there, and I didn't know that we both have something in common, a child with Down syndrome.
Yes, my son, Paul, he'll turn 10 this year, which is really hard to believe. It's been a fast 10 years. I'm delighted to be here. I know you want to talk about how we write at the culture of life.
There's so many things I want to talk to you about. But let's start by talking about a little bit of your faith journey and where you started and how you became the Catholic mother of 10. We'll start there. How's that?
Okay. I can't say I always was Catholic, but I wasn't as deeply in love as I've come to be. You always can fall deeper. I had become a little bit laid back, shall we say, in my early married life. And then I found out I was pregnant. I went, for some reason, I'd been working for 2 years. I've been married for 3 years. I'm feeling like life is going pretty good. And for some reason, I got the idea I should pray for courage. And I thought, that's a strange thing to pray for.
Uh-oh.
But I should have known right then and there I'm in deep trouble. And the next day I found out I was pregnant, and I've honestly never been more scared in my life.
Well, you had a special reason to be frightened about that, Sherry. I mean, we all get a little bit scared the first time, but you had a specific reason. You want to share that with us?
Yeah, well, okay, I have a substandard airway. I had a tracheotomy as a child because I was a preemie, and the doctors who did restorative surgery on my larynx, when I got a second tracheotomy to repair it, told me that I couldn't go through childbirth, but I didn't realize what they meant. I thought, fine, just have a C-section, we're good. He really meant don't get pregnant because I couldn't guarantee an airway. And I didn't understand that until I went to the OBGYNs to begin the medical treatment of going through the process of being pregnant. And the doctor said abort. That was their first and frankly last suggestion before I walked out that door. And I went to another one, and they said, you really should abort. And at that point, I was almost hysterical because I thought, I cannot do that. And so I called my uncle and had him help me find a doctor. They told you were
threatening your own life, right, Sherry? This is a life-threatening condition.
Yeah, because I couldn't be intubated safely. And so if any complications came, they wouldn't be able to anesthetize me to deal with the complications. And so it would be deadly to both me and the baby. And that was what they told me. And it's not not factually untrue. It's just there were other medical options. And so we got a good doctor who agreed with me and we worked through it and came up with the most radical and conservative at the same time approach, a both and solution, which is that I had to have a tracheotomy the day before my first son was born under local anesthesia. Not something I'd recommend, but, it did save his life and mine.
You're both alive.
And then I went to after my first son, I recovered and back to normal. Okay, here we go. And I actually was put on medication that is not within keeping with the Catholic Church, and I was very sad about it. And then when I moved to Maryland, I got a new doctor, and they said, I don't think it really...
You mean to prevent conception?
Yes, to prevent pregnancy, yes. And we decided we were going to stop that, and as soon as we decided we were going to stop that, because my OBGYN said she thought that there was another...
It started.
Sherry, I'm sorry. I have to restart. Okay, go ahead. Start from the contraceptive.
Okay. Well, the story was I'd gone down to visit my parents, and I was feeling very sad, and I had forgotten my medication, and my husband sent down the medication in a FedEx with a little note. The only reason why I can send this to you is because I know one day we were going to stop, and that was all it took for me to throw it in the trash. Oh. He's very sweet, very gallant, wanted to protect me. And so we had our second child, and we didn't need the technology had advanced that it was okay. And it kept getting better such that it really was fine. And I haven't needed tracheotomy.
Was it a function of technology improving or doctors that were more attuned to your needs, or both?
Well, no, technology has improved. I can now use a pediatric intubation tube if I need surgery, it's not a problem. That is actually a reality that has occurred in the last, I'd say, 10 years. Before then, the doctor was saying, I think we can do it without it. So there was a little bit of a leap of faith there to trust the doctors saying, you can do this. But also, the technology did simply advance such that it no longer was even an issue. But, so both of those things happened. But the result was 10 children later, we're doing okay. And each child brought us deeper into the mysteries of the faith. And, when we got to number 8, we thought we'd given, and then we got Paul. And it's like, you don't know nothing.
Why is Paul so special, Sherry?
Yeah. You want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. So Paul shows up, and I suddenly have to start over from square one.
Because
I'm now a mom of a kid with a special need. Yes.
Paul has an extra chromosome, otherwise known as trisomy 21, or commonly known as
Down syndrome, named after the doctor who discovered it. It's not because they're down people. It's because
his name was Dr. Langdon Down, and he identified it as a separate. He didn't know what caused it, but he knew that it was not a mental health condition. It was actually a physical condition.
Yeah, and every single kid that has Down syndrome shares this. So we're like all a family that's connected by one child, by a chromosome.
That's right. And remind my listeners that I also have a daughter with Down syndrome, and even though I was a mother of 2, I certainly did learn parenting all over again when Christina was born. So much so that I wrote a book, A Special Mother is Born, to describe
I had that book.
how I learned that.
I had that
great. You should be in it. Maybe part 2. So what did you learn from Paul? What did he teach you? People call them professors of love. What did your professor teach you?
Well, first off, there's always room for more. There's always room for more. And when you've had 8 children, you can get a little jaded. First step, yay, let's keep moving. And it's not because you don't care that the child's taking their first step, but because you're moving. You're trying to get everybody going in the same direction, and that's like herding cats. But when you've got someone who has Down syndrome and they decide to take the trash out, you pay attention.
Right.
One of the things, he's a little gentleman. When I had my youngest, who's 2 years younger than Paul, and she fell asleep in the car, and I'm carrying her out, he climbed into the back seat, got her shoes that she'd kicked off, and brought them in. And that's an example of what a young person who has Down syndrome does. There's a mindfulness that they have because everything they do is deliberate. Mm-hmm. Good, bad, and the otherwise, but you pay attention because they've done it. And so that's and they start conversations. You meet people. You don't just have a child with Down syndrome. You have an extended family of families who have children with Down syndrome. You become friends with people because your child looks like their child.
That's right.
And you know that they know what it's like to take care of a child who has these kind of needs. And so that one of the things that I hear stories. Oh, I had an uncle who had Down syndrome, and he was my favorite uncle, and he always took us to go to the park to go run the swings, and then he would buy us ice cream. And that's a story I would never have heard from this woman who was there with her kids, except that my son reminds her of her uncle.
Yeah, right. They love a chance to describe their favorite people with Down syndrome. I hear that all the time, and I love it. I really I love that they have the chance to share that because obviously that person is very important to them, and I love to hear what's possible for my daughter in the future.
Right. Paul decides to run a 5K. We're all going to be screaming because he's running a 5K.
And it means so much more for him than for one of us, although it would be a major miracle for me. But
me too.
Because we know what they've had to overcome.
Yes. It reminds you that it's possible, of what is possible. Mm-hmm. Oddly enough, the theoretical limitations that they have reveal to us what is possible.
That's right.
So that would be my short.
When we don't place artificial limits, we don't allow society to. And that's one good thing about society is they seem to be relaxing a little bit about putting people down into a box, largely due to the efforts of people like you and me saying, look what my kid did. He ran a 5K and breaking through barriers. I mean, remember the days when having a child with Down syndrome, the doctor automatically assumed you'd be putting that child in an institution. Not too far.
Yeah, or they were called educable.
Right.
Or they were called
No one ever tried. No one ever tried to educate them.
I have a master's in special education, and I don't see Down syndrome children often in the severe areas because they usually are able to do both socially and physically much more than people would take for granted. To me, I see a lot of ability to follow routines. So if you can. You can teach a routine, you are halfway home.
That's right. And they'll stick to it, and they'll remind you when you deviate from it, won't they?
Yeah, you will never get to stop on the routine. Yeah, like my son is big into grace, so our food gets blessed at least 6 times before we get to eat. So somebody didn't put their hands together.
Mine reminded me. You can pray before watermelon, a random piece of watermelon. You don't just have to save it for dinner. She would pray at every piece of food that went in her mouth, and I said, that's a good thing. So we started praying grace at every meal. Yes. So that's how that worked for our family. But you're right. Once you get them in a routine, you got it for life.
You're stuck. You better like this routine because it's going to be here for a while.
Chocolate ice cream at 7 p.m. is chocolate ice cream at 7 p.m.
Where is it? It's 7 p.m. somewhere. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
You better live close to a 24-hour store, just in case.
Yes.
But it's wonderful how our children have trained us, isn't it?
Yes. We're not in charge. We're just we're the butlers.
We're the staff.
This is very funny. It's very true.
This is called Down syndrome mom humor, people. This is how we joke around. But it didn't keep you from having this fabulous dream career that you have, maybe not high paid, but very fulfilling, of being a Catholic writer. So you had Paul was your 9th?
Yes, my 9th. He was my 9th. He was my 9th. And he also had to have open heart surgery at 2 months. Mm-hmm. But he was born in the year of Paul, which is why his name is Paul.
Oh, wow. Beautiful.
And that was when I really got serious about writing. Up until then, I had done kind of, I'd done some, but then I started to say, I'm going to do this because I want to write about what happens to him. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of when it took off more, is what I want to say. Because once you offer God some, God always says, "I've got more for you. I've got more." That's right. As long as you say yes, I'm going to keep giving you more. So, and that was
that's right. And it's amazing how he leads us. Yeah. So he kept you expanded from Catholic Mom to different online Catholic outlets and print.
Yeah, I wrote for Catholic Digest and Faith and Family, which was a really wonderful blog run by Daniel Bean for a while there. And then I also started writing for the National Catholic Register and the local Catholic paper, the Catholic Standard, for a time.
You're located
covering
in
like
DC.
the white mass and yes, because I live just outside of DC, so in the Archdiocese of Washington D.C. So get to do some kind of political wonky sort of things occasionally. They're cool. Like for the covering the March for Life or the death of Antonin Scalia, Chief Justice, stuff like that.
Okay.
But with respect to writing about Paul, he was born in 2008, and so I called him the second most famous Down syndrome boy of that year's election.
I almost drove off a bridge when I heard who was going to be the Republican vice presidential candidate, because nobody in the country except maybe you knew who Sarah Palin was outside of Alaska. And I said, that's Trick's mother.
Yes. I knew her for that reason. Yes, I knew who she was because of Down syndrome. Yes.
That's right. Same thing here. Amy Forrest Rogers, the congresswoman, with whom I have a good relationship. And I didn't have a relationship with Sarah Palin, but she was an inspiration, being able to stay as governor and have her baby with Down syndrome and tell the world that he was a blessing. It was a huge boost to the Down syndrome advocacy movement. It really was.
No, I remember that because I remember reading about it because I was at the time pregnant with Paul.
And did you know he had Downs at the time?
Yes, I did. So that was kind of heartening to see that. It was just one more reminder it was going to be okay. And I will tell you that going back to when we originally talked about how I started this path as a mother, and I was scared, praying for courage, and I drove to Mass the day after I got told to abort for that first child. And it wasn't my regular parish, but it was a Mass, and I don't know what Mass it was for them, but for me, I called it the Dripping Baby Mass, because I had never seen more women with babies. They were carrying them in their arms. They were pregnant. They were pushing strollers with 3 deep. I'd never seen more babies at a Mass than at this one. As they were going up for, their mothers were going up for communion, and everyone going through it was like saying to me, "It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay."
Amazing.
So I'm sorry, I had to go back to that because that was the Dripping Baby Mass is a favorite moment for me.
Oh, I don't blame you. That's a beautiful way that God spoke to your heart, wordlessly. And I think when you and I walk around town where we live, Washington, or I live in Connecticut, and we have our child in tow, just a sight of an ordinary family living a happy life with a person, and sometimes difficult life, with a person down syndrome, but an ordinary life. That life, it's going to be okay. That's all we need to tell moms. You can do this. You got this. It's going to be okay. And I think that's 90% of what they need to hear. I'm talking about a woman who has just faced a Down syndrome prenatal diagnosis. A lot of times, it's scary.
That's frightening. No, it's very scary. No, it is scary because it's a great unknown. You don't know how severe the imprint's going to be. You don't know if this child's going to talk. You don't know if this child's going to be able to be potty trained or live on their own. There are like 1,000 things that immediately explode in your head that you have to worry about that you didn't know you needed to worry about. and you don't know what you don't know. So all of that is very frightening. And if you don't have other people going, yeah, it is scary, but it's going to be okay. We're not mincing words that it's not going to be different.
Right.
But it's going to be okay.
Well, yeah, and I was fortunate enough to have the sense that God was with me throughout the whole thing, that He and I were going to handle this. And I think that's the message for Catholics and for all people of faith, that whatever God gives you, He gives you the strength for. And sometimes it's by stretching your ability to trust quite a bit, isn't it? Especially when your child goes through surgery at a young age. I mean, that's something no parent wants to confront. But you survived, and so did Paul.
Yes, and he's now he's a kid who we have to keep up with because he's quite fast.
So he apparently did very well.
He did not know. He's not gotten the memo that he's supposed to have low tone. And I'm not telling him.
Somebody should have told him he's handicapped, right?
Yeah.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
So you started writing, and so how did you feel that you were called to write, to express your joy at motherhood, your frustrations, your experience at motherhood?
Yes. That would be the way. Actually, I started by writing humor, is what I'll be honest is that. I started writing out of my frustrations because I could not get my children potty trained. It was a tremendous struggle with many of my children to get them potty trained. And one day I vented to my dad that I've been at this for years and years and years. And, before I was a mom, I was a special educator. And, one of the things I was good at is teaching kids to be potty trained.
Oh, wow.
And so the ultimate irony is I couldn't motivate my own children. And so my dad said, well, why don't you write it? And so I wrote this humor piece called The Potty Wars. Where, I wrote about the fact that, one of the kids I tried to bribe I put the television in the bathroom so they could watch cartoons and they would accidentally go,
Right.
And they fell asleep on the potty, another child I tried to bribe with, stickers and ballet lessons and, this is like the Price is Right Showcase Showdown. I was promising the world, if only you would just go. And she wanted the full payment in full for the first time of success, and considered the failure to provide all the glamorous prizes to be me reneging on the deal.
Oh, that's funny. Clever girl.
What?
She's a clever girl. She's a good businesswoman.
Yes. So that, total frustration was how I started writing. And people laughed. They really enjoyed
because they related, I'm sure. I'm laughing as I hear you describe it. I remember those wars.
The craziness. One child, they got to the age, they were going to turn 4 in 3 days. And, I was at my edge, the end. Like, I've got 3 in diapers. This has to stop. And their cousin had potty trained, of course, at 2. So I told him it was illegal in the state of Maryland, because I knew he could do it. I said, illegal in the state of Maryland, but you can't turn 4 unless you're potty trained. And he potty trained that day. Oh,
a lawyer.
It's like, and he loves that story. Of course, he told it to his next younger brother. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
So this is how I started writing. And as for the Catholic part, I am Catholic, and so I kept coming back to it, is the way I would say it, is that, and then because I kept getting asked to write stories for Catholic publications, it made me have to study my Catholic faith more, and so I became more, God always uses all these little things, kind of there are no accidents, to pull you deeper in. And, one of my other passions is stories. I love writing stories. I love making people laugh, and I love that. As I told my students, a good story is never just a story. A good story always reveals something, which is what we know from Jesus in the parables. Is the stories were good stories, but there was always a deeper meaning than just the story. And so I tried writing a couple of pieces that were using that technique to get at deeper truths, because we sometimes need, in a sense, the truth to be veiled in order to discover it, is the way I would put it. So like when you want to deal with some of the trickier topics like abortion, where people are very emotionally invested in their positions, we need to get them to be able to hear us. And so if you come out swinging, God always is in the whisper.
Right. You come out swinging, they close down, and they're not listening anymore. Yeah.
So telling stories which reveal deeper realities can help people who might otherwise be closed to the gospel of life to hear you.
And they think they've discovered the answers on their own. That's the beauty of a good writer, right? Especially a good fiction writer. They come to the epiphany, and they think they're a real genius because they found it. So you don't have to hit them over the head with reality that life is precious, et cetera, et cetera. It comes to them through the story,
Right. Like, for example, let's take having lots of children and the criticism that you might not be able to love or care for that many. Mm-hmm. My grandfather lost his thumb on a piece of machinery when he was a teen, and as a result, he wasn't able to enter into the seminary because of the rules at the time, precluded him. That's good for me because then he married my grandmother and dad. But he also had 9 children in total, and one day one of his children, who was a teen, asked his dad, which of your children do you love the best? Rather loaded question. Mm-hmm. And he held up his hands and said, you see, I have 9 fingers. I love and need them all. I use that same line with my 10 kids, with the bonus of not having lost a thumb. you know.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful way of expressing it.
So that's what I try to do with my writing, is to try to get at either luminous stories or to get at deeper realities through the story. Because to me, that's what the interesting thing about writing is that, when I write for myself, I get to chase down all the rabbit holes until I discover what it is I actually think. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I think that. Who knew? Right. Not me. So when we get to, dealing with trying to write for a Catholic audience, I don't want to preach to the choir, because I know the choir believes this. They may need encouragement and reinforcement, but we want to evangelize to the person who either doesn't know, doesn't think it's correct, or who is facing a crisis. Right. Those are the people that those are the fish we want to catch. Right. And any discussion of the culture of life has to recognize the goal is not to preach, but to inform through revealing to the people we're talking to the innate dignity and beauty of the position. Mm-hmm. And to show them the consistency. And that's not through necessarily argument, but through starting with where they already agree with us. Like, let's say, to me, we always want to be more pro-life, not less. Mm-hmm. So we see the innate dignity in the poor and the homeless, that they need to be cared for, they need to be fed. We need to care for the poor that we can see, and that will help people then to see why we need to care for the poor that we don't.
Very good.
And so that's kind of that's one thing. Another one thing that I think is major is to win hearts, is that when we're talking about this, is that we need to help them feel less isolated, less alone, less reason to be angry, and so.
So you think anger is a large barrier against the pro-life movement? You think there's a lot of anger out there?
Okay. I do, and I also think that we have to not going back to when we were talking about being moms of kids with Down syndrome, we can't pretend that it's all going to be easy or light. It's going to be a luminous cross. It's going to involve sacrifice. It's going to involve embracing a sacrificial life. Mm-hmm. But and that's not the easiest to sell. Come with us and embrace the cross. Yeah. That sounds good. No, I'm going to sit here and eat ice cream. You're good.
Right. Where's option B?
Yeah. But telling people I will help you carry this cross facilitates that reality. When I profiled the Sisters for Life for Catholic Digest a couple of years ago, that's essentially what they do. They take women in, sometimes even take the husband in if their people are in that kind of dire need. They take other children in of the mother, and they help them, let them stay with them, and they get them medical attention, and they help them to continue their education. They give them food. I mean, it's a weird thing to call the Sisters for Life and talk to them, and in the midst of the phone conversation, the sister says, "Oh, hold on a minute," and then tells another sister where the diapers are.
It seems like their normal lifestyle there.
Yeah. But it shows exactly that they are being the Veronicas and the Simons for these women who have agreed to walk this path.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was blessed to interview them too in their house in Stamford, Connecticut, and I brought Christina along. She is a very good judge of people. She's about, I guess, 10 at the time, and she liked their house so much I had to chase her around to get her to go home. She was hiding from me, trying to stay, and the sisters were delighted, and they helped me It just speared her out of there eventually. But she knew that she was loved and welcomed, and the cookies didn't hurt either. They're great bakers. But, it was instant, that sense of, oh, they love me here. And she believed me. If she doesn't feel welcome, she won't even go in. She's a very good judge of that, whether people are truly respecting her dignity, really.
Right, and that's the key, is that when you write about contentious topics, you're appealing not just to logos, but to pathos and ethos, but mostly you're trying to speak from one heart to another about the best possible reality, which is, if we really think about it, the best possible reality for any of us is often not the easiest possible reality.
No, because how do we become our best selves but by stretching our ability to love and to give and to forget about ourselves? Speaking of which, I'm going to read a quick passage in the Gospel of Life, Evangelium Vitae, talking about that ideal, the ideal of marriage. You know, a lot of people think, oh, encyclicals, I can't read an encyclical. So what I do is I stick in a relevant passage when it comes up in our conversation. So I'll quote St. John Paul II here. By speaking of a certain special participation of man and woman in the creative work of God, the Council wishes to point out that having a child is an event which is deeply human and full of religious meaning, insofar as it involves both the spouses who form one flesh, as in Genesis 2, and God who makes himself present. As I wrote in my letter to families, quote, when a new person is born of the conjugal union of the two, he brings with him into the world a particular image and likeness of God himself. The genealogy of the person is inscribed in the very biology of generation. In affirming that the spouses as parents cooperate with God the Creator in conceiving and giving birth to a new human being, we are not speaking merely with reference to the laws of biology. Instead, we wish to emphasize that God himself is present in human fatherhood and motherhood quite differently than he is present in all other instances of begetting on earth. Indeed, God alone is the source of that image and likeness, which is proper to the human being as it was received in creation, beginning at the continuation of creation. So you and I are doing very noble things, just raising those kids and potty training and participating in creation in ways that we perhaps never dreamed. And it's a wonderful gift to have the gift of writing, to be able to describe that to people who are also in the middle of raising children, but maybe don't see it quite as the gift that John Paul sees it.
No, I love that particular quote, because I always looked at it as being, okay, so the genealogy is the past. I mean, in other words, when you have a child, you really have touched the infinite God, because the genetics that we bring to the table are all of our past, the sum of who we are and all the people who came before us is in those little chromosomes. Right. And then the present, which is our marital relationship and the conception and the birth of that child, that singular person who will never appear in any other time in history, but can only be here now. And then the future extending onward, because souls are immortal. So this is for forever. And so I always love that little thought about the idea of each child being an example of God's infinite love, because it's always been, and it is now, and is forever.
So it puts things in perspective for you, right, in the hubbub of daily living. And if you can convey that through a story, then you don't have to do all that explanation that we just did, because most people wouldn't understand it or be interested. But you can convey it in an image and in a story the way our Lord did, made very infinite things very simple and tangible to people
if I start talking,
read.
If I start talking like that, my kids are like, "Oh, Mom, you're getting all Catholic on us again."
Right? You can't be like that to your own children sometimes.
Catholic mom, you're being all Catholic mom to me. Yeah, you bet. And so I use story where I can, because it allows you to get around that, as you say. Because like on my blog, I talk about that humor is like a chocolate bar, and the chocolate coating makes the truth, that is the nougat, go down easier, because no one wants to eat a bar of pure nougat.
That's right.
And so I think that's true
like
with
gummy vitamins, right?
Yes. I'll take the
gummy vitamins.
Please make them palatable. Make the truth palatable. Make me able to stomach it. So, like one of the stories that I did at one point, linking back to Down syndrome and pro-life life, was to, if you remember last year, there was a story about how Iceland had solved the problem of Down syndrome. And what they really meant is
from CBS,
that we've eliminated.
I don't think I've ever watched that. I've seen bits and pieces. It breaks my heart. Yeah. There's no other. By the way, there is no other way to eliminate Down syndrome other than aborting.
Yeah.
If we spent as much time to do prenatal diagnosis as we did to perhaps treat the disorder, perhaps we would have. But instead, science chose to seek and destroy methods of prenatal diagnosis, and so therefore we know how to eliminate the child, but not the disorder. And some parents even argue we don't need to, but certainly a large percentage of people in Iceland want to.
Yes, for what reason I'm not sure, but okay. But in order to discuss it, I talked about finding an island full of creatures that were sterile and gentle and weak, but unique. I made them unicorns, but they were weak. They couldn't pull anything. They couldn't carry anything. They weren't easy. They couldn't be trained or broken. The only thing they could do was be beautiful, but that's all there was no utilitarian purpose to these creatures. And so people decided that they weren't of any use and killed them. And then I pointed out that the same thing's happening in Iceland.
Right. Beautiful.
And so, I know that Pope John Paul talked about the danger of utilitarianism towards people, reducing people to things where their only value is in how much money they can make and what they can do for you.
And how they make you feel, how they add to your life. And people with Down syndrome, unfortunately, when the woman gets a diagnosis, she doesn't get the good news, does she? She gets a list of symptoms. I don't know what you got, but a list of what could go wrong. They never tell you the things they can do for you and how much love you'll find. They always tell you, well, it's this and that and this and that.
Well, I would say that you get all the symptoms, you get all the things that you're going to have to think about, all the things you're going to have to worry about. And then you get people who will tell you these glamour shot stories, about the girl who swam the English Channel or got the PhD, the boy who, went to law school and stuff. And it's like if you had a child and someone said, well, they might be an Olympian, and you're like, yeah, maybe.
What are the odds?
So what you need is people to walk with you for what's going to be real, which is that, yes, they're going to have these conditions and these concerns, but you're going to find that they're really amazing human beings, and you will absolutely fall in love with these people. And you will fall in love with these people, and you'll be surprised by all they can do. And you will also be surprised by how much more you love.
Exactly. I wish that were what doctors said. Of course, most of them don't have the experience we have. But that's why I wrote A Special Mother is Born, so they could have a tool in their tool chest to say, well, I don't really know what it's like to raise a child, but here's 33 parents who do have a child with special needs. So why don't you listen to them? And that's what I was offering it for, so that they could say, look, here's a good resource. And not to say that these people, 5 of those parents who wrote stories for me lost their children. So there is tragedy, but there's beauty in all of it because there's a love of God throughout. And
what I would tell people is, and you'll get, there's like a chicken soup story about what, you planned a trip to Italy and you wind up in Holland. And I'm thinking,
Welcome to Holland, it's called, That's very famous about how your trip to Italy is different than you thought because you don't, and having a child with Down syndrome is a different experience.
Yeah, and what I would say to that is every child is a trip to Holland that you thought was going to Italy, okay? I'm just going to say that right now. I have 10 kids, and every single trip, at some point you discover, hey, I thought I was in Italy. No, I'm in Holland.
Absolutely.
So I chafe a little bit at that one only because I think it doesn't speak the larger truth, which is that every child is a challenge. Just what you don't get, when you bring home a baby that doesn't have trisomy 21, you don't get the laundry list of worries about, okay, when they're, 18, they're going to go out and do things you don't want them to do, or when they're, 15, they're going to wreck your car, or, whatever it is, they're going to, bring home bad grades, whatever the thing is, here's the thing. You have brought a new human being into this world. You're going to be responsible for them. You're going to love them so much your heart will break, and they will test you every way humanly possible.
That's
it's
right.
Worth it.
And expand your ability to love in sometimes the most excruciatingly unhappy circumstances.
Yes.
Puking
It's a luminous
in the middle of the night comes to mind. Temperatures and viruses
yes.
in the middle of the night are always
yes.
one of our favorites.
Throw up, stomach flu while you're out at a baseball game. Flat tires, calls in the middle of the night. Who ate my ice cream? They're going to do all these things, little, big and small. They're going to teach you how to love like God the Father loves, which is,
that's right.
Despite the fact that we have many sins and flaws. They will expand your heart to make it more God-sized, is what I would say, which will involve stretch marks and will hurt.
A lot of pain in the middle, a lot of growing pain.
Yeah. So welcome to parenthood. It's a luminous cross.
Sherry, there you
go.
Ahead. When you look back at the kind of Catholic you were before you had children and you were newlywed and you thought you had your life together and the kind of Catholic you are now, how long is that a time span?
Oh my gosh, it's 28 years that I've been married.
Okay, compare yourself. What have you? How have you grown in your faith?
First off, I would say I am. You kind of knocked me for a loop there as you asked this question. It's a great question.
Well, you can take time to answer it. I can tell you about me. I am the kind of person that wanted to have control over everything. I thought I was very smart. I thought I knew everything. I thought I was very holy, and I was very self-sacrificing. I didn't know nothing. All right? I was a rank amateur and very cocky. And having any kid is going to knock that down, but especially a kid with Down syndrome who thinks they know everything is definitely going to challenge that assertion that I'm a genius. And my first child was one of the easier ones that I've had. And, of course, I was an excellent parent after the first. And then you have a couple more who sort of show you you don't know what you're doing.
Yes.
And guess what? You need God. You need your husband, you need God, and you need your friends and your good Catholic supports wherever they are. If it's online or TV shows, you look out for support where you thought you kind of had it all together before.
Okay, then I think I can answer is that I was pious and I loved my faith and I loved God. And through my marriage and through the fruits of that marriage, I've come to love God much more deeply. And to trust Him a lot more and to trust myself a lot less.
Mm-hmm. There you go. There you go. Perfect. Because you don't know as much as you thought you did.
Yeah, that's where we go. And I keep going back to God's in the whispers. And when I was younger, and still struggle with this occasionally, I talk too much, and so if you're doing all the talking, you can't hear the whisper. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So even if you're doing all this pious stuff, going to Mass, praying a rosary, all kinds of devotionals, really thinking you're doing pretty darn good, if you're not listening, then you're doing a one-sided relationship. Mm-hmm. And you're not actually having a relationship. You're singing to the wonderful choir, which is you. Wonderful, Yeah. So I think, 10 children and a wonderful husband of 28 years has taught me that you can always love more. Mm-hmm. You can always learn more. And you can always go deeper and deeper in.
And we're not good, reliable judges as how far God should take us, are we? Because we would have said stop. We probably said stop many times before.
Yeah, God's plan is always more imaginative and luminous than ours. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And He has great plans for us. I'm looking at a quote here that I love. You were not made for comfort. You were made for greatness, by Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI. I love that. You were made for greatness.
I love that quote.
Greatness can be very messy.
Greatness is messy. Greatness involves a lot of hard slogging hours that don't get any credit anywhere but with God. We only like the hours that get credited where everyone else says, "Hey, good job."
Credit on earth, yeah. Right, the good feedback, yeah, not the ones where you make a dinner that no one likes, or no one manages to be home. I'm getting into that phase where they're all running in different directions, and
you
feel like I built this great house. Where are you? Well, they're enjoying the world because you taught them to be ready for the world, right? So they're out there. What's the problem with that? There's no problem with that. That's everything working. Of course, it's nice when they come home and enjoy time together. But you did want them to go out in the world, right? So that's what they're doing.
Yes, but
it doesn't always feel
only when
good.
I wasn't going to be inconvenienced by it.
That's right. Only when I had something else to do, like a radio show, See.
Yeah, I mean that's just it. Is that the way I look at it is that the whole job of parenting is the words of St. John the Baptist: "I must decrease."
Yeah.
And really learned that when it was funny. One of my sons is a really excellent athlete, and he won like a lot of awards for his running. And someone said, you must have done a lot. You must be very proud. And I am very proud of what he did. But I can't say I did any of this other than stood by, cheered, and handed him protein shakes. When he said, "I need a protein shake," or beets, and for a while I'm cutting up beets and I always look like Lady Macbeth at the end of every meal because I've got beet juice in my hand. But, giving me the praise where the praise is due to him for putting all the hours in, and I felt great joy in all the hours he had put in and how they bore fruit. And that was more special to me than anything that I had done with respect to him, was to see him triumph. And that's the short lesson of parenting, is that you're going to not mind growing old, spending every last sou, and having run every stupid errand that they ever ask by the time they're through with you.
That's right.
And that's the lesson of parenting, and that's the lesson that, the luminous, I would say that's the message of writing, if we really want to be a witness to life, the gospel of life and what it is, we have to constantly repeat that it is the gospel of joyful, luminous, glorious, and sorrowful mysteries, and that you have to embrace all of them in order to live a full, true life. And it's worth it. There's only one section that's bad. There's only one set of mysteries that are bad. All the rest of them are good.
And we know the ending is a happy ending, an eternally happy ending. We've skipped through to the ending as you do sometimes, and you cheat on a novel and you find out, wait, this ends well, okay, and then the rest is the suffering which leads to it, and it's definitely worth it as a mom. Now we have to sell this to a culture that so many young women are deciding that not only aren't marriage in their future, but childbearing isn't in their future.
Right.
And that's a tough sell. It's getting harder, I think, don't you?
I think it's been getting harder for some time now.
Right.
And I think part of it is that there is a crazy expectation that when you become a parent, that you will have your act together. You'll have your 401k set up aside for their college fund on the day that they're born. You'll add, $10,000 to every year dutifully, and you'll make sure that they only eat vegetables and fruit the first year, and they'll only drink bottled water. I mean, it's just the amount of nonsense that I'm making up stuff right now, but honest to goodness.
The standards are really ridiculous, I know, out there, and I had a lot of them too. I wanted to have a house before I had children, and God called me to be a mother when I wasn't even sure if I had a job. So, well, guess what? We're here and we have a house. It may not have been as soon as I wanted, but it certainly happened. But we needed to be open. We wouldn't have had a wonderful 25-year-old.
Oh.
We weren't open to temporary poverty, And then you look back on those days, you say, they weren't that terrible. They weren't that terrible. Because we know now what a treasure she is, what all of our kids are. But the culture sort of teaches you that stuff comes first. And kids are kind of like, if you have the time and the inclination, and that they're time suckers or career suckers, or they'll ruin everything. And I don't know about you, but it sounds like you got your career through the inspiration of having children. I know I did. By your writing career, that is.
Yes. Well, no. I would put it this way: is that I got to discover a career that I actually had always wanted, but didn't think was possible.
Same here.
Because I had children, and they allowed me to then have stories to tell.
That's right.
And so, what I would just tell you to someone, if somebody's out there who's discovered that they're pregnant and they're scared, the first thing they should know is they're not alone. Mm-hmm. And the second thing they should know is that God has a bigger plan for you than you can imagine for yourself. Mm-hmm. And so as great as your plans might be, God has a better one.
That's right. Trust him with it. He knows. He knows you better than you know yourself. And he loves you better than you could ever love yourself.
Yeah.
So someone who knows you and loves you can't be wrong. Can't be wrong. He's got wonderful things for you. And it may be a bumpy ride. The very first moment I found out I was pregnant, like I said, I had no job. My husband's job was ending in 3 months. Neither of us had insurance. And I ran to the Blessed Sacrament. I said, okay, God, this is wonderful. Now help. Next day I got a job. And it had insurance. And by the time I had the baby, my husband had a permanent job, a year-round job. He had a seasonal job. The field that he's in now. 26,
awesome.
25 years later. It just came out of the blue. Somebody literally, when I was pregnant and working and he was unemployed, somebody walked into our living room to install cable, looked at him in his PJs at 3 p.m. and said, you need a job. And I said, that has to be from God.
Yeah, that's pretty direct.
Who gets a job in their PJs?
That's awesome. I completely love that story. That's the reality.
And it was cable TV, and now he's working in the cable industry. Not exactly hooking up TVs anymore, but that's where he started. And if it weren't for our humility, being in your PJs when the cable guy comes, then God wouldn't be, and to accept that God could work through that, and accept that God was calling us to have a child when we didn't know where the next paycheck necessarily was coming from. Then he couldn't have done the wonderful things through us that he's done. And I always share that because I know a lot of people are afraid of what a child, the responsibility. It's scary.
And, the responsibility, the fear is that it will take away your freedom. It will take away your ability to choose your life for yourself. Mm-hmm. And what love involves, let me put it this way. Those of you who, when you fall in love, some of your freedom, in a sense, is surrendered. Because you can't go date somebody else if you're in love with this person. Because, so your freedom to do as you will, wherever you want, gets limited by the fact that you love this person.
That's right.
Which means you're not going to go out clubbing to look for somebody else. Because you love this person enough that you want to be exclusive to them. Anytime you love, you have to willingly surrender some of your autonomy or liberty, so to speak. But it is freely given, and so it's not a loss of freedom. It's a reorienting of what your freedom is for.
That's right.
And that's the real thing that happens when you love. And that's true whether it's for a spouse or for a child.
Or for a child, or a special needs child. It's a different level of commitment.
Yes.
But there are also different levels of reward. It's incredible.
Exactly. So I guess I'm not sure how we help people to discover this freedom, how to use freedom well, which is basically to become sacrificial. Again, that's another one of those lovely cells. Hey, want to lose freedom well? Be sacrificial. It's not going to
that's a tough message. You have to. I think you have to live by. You have to live by example. I mean, very few of us are signing up to join Mother Teresa's order, but there is a certain attractiveness to that total self-giving, and it certainly captured the world's imagination. I remember as a young woman seeing that video of Mother Teresa that the Petri sisters did. They literally followed her around the world. And writing Mother a letter. And she wrote back to me, I wanted to go to Guatemala. She said, go to the Bronx, because they speak Spanish there, and I speak Spanish.
Yeah.
And I had the most incredible day. And the love that those sisters had, Mother wasn't there that day, were so winsome. It was so beautiful to see that sacrifice and the effect on the tough people of the South Bronx. who knew very little love in their own lives, but they recognized that love. There was even a thief who threw his wallet into their garden, the wallet he had stolen. No cash in it, but all the credit cards, the license, the family pictures, because he knew that they loved. Even a thief knew that these women loved. And so they didn't say anything to me. They didn't preach to me. They just lived their lives. And if you and I lived our lives, you with the 10 kids are right there as an advertisement for self-care and love. I'm sorry, but, for all the abuse you must take in public, and I'm sure we could go another hour on things people say to you about having television.
I did a stand-up on that. I did a stand-up bit on that
one. Give me
one.
a couple of your best ones. What are some of the questions they say? What are some of your best answers?
Don't you know how this works? Yeah, pretty sure. So, don't you have any good TV?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Don't you have cable?
Don't you have cable? Right.
There's nothing good on. So.
Nothing as good as this.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
So those are two of the ones that stick out. And I try to always kind of respond to it with lightness, because being combative, that looks defensive, and it kind of makes them think the reason why you're angry is because you're too overwhelmed. So
right, you poor soul, you must be overtaxed because you're cranky.
Yeah.
Where they just inserted themselves into your most intimate relationship with your husband, complete stranger, but that you're supposed to be okay with that, right?
Yeah, well, I always accept medical advice from somebody I don't know. So,
oh my goodness!
That was somebody that I'm I would say that happens really less now that they're older. But it was. You can't get
one place anymore, can you?
That's also true.
I don't know how many you have.
That's true. Well, when you tell people that and they look at you and they do a double take, like, you're not serious, are you? Like, nobody makes up that number.
Yeah, right.
But and then they ask me, all yours, all the same husband.
Right. They're trying to look for explanations, and this is what also happens. I only have 3, but this is what also happens with Down syndrome. I was asked several times on different radio shows, what is the question you don't want people to ask? And I hate to make people uncomfortable talking to me, because I always want to be open to discuss life with Christina. In fact, I love, my kids see another family with Down syndrome in the supermarket, like, oh, here she goes. It's going to be half an hour now of sharing stories with that stranger that we're going to be friends with.
Yes.
Whatever. But the one question I don't like, and I actually never got, was, did you know?
I got that one before, yes.
And I get upset because the implication is, well, did you choose to have this child? In other words, did you have the baby anyway? In my case, I had a spiritual insight who's going to have child with Downs, but I turned down prenatal testing. I was almost 40. I knew what the risks were. And I think that implies that most women, a lot of women anyway, who children with Down syndrome nowadays were too young to be considered testing, to consider prenatal testing.
Right.
So they were surprised. So they want to know if you were surprised, or did you actually go through with the birth anyway?
Well, I actually, I look at it as that, I knew. Mm-hmm. And that tells them something else.
Right.
In other words, that I was willing to take what came.
Well, that shows how. Yeah, that's a real testament to faith there. And well, good for you for not being afraid of that question, because that one I wasn't never looking forward to. Maybe that's why I never got it. But anyway, we're getting to the end of our program, and I want you to share where we can find you online, Sherry Antonetti. I'm going to repeat your name. So tell us again all the locations that you can be found, but most of all, your blog.
Okay, well, my blog is called Chocolate for Your Brain. The address of it is Sherry Antonetti Writes at blogspot.com, because...
But you can be Googled too, right, Sherry?
I can be Googled Sherry Antonetti, and you can find me very easily then. And I link all my publications on my blog at Chocolate for Your Brain, and you also can get a link to my book and other places that I've written. And you can also find some of the favorite stories, like about Paul, or about like 50-something betters, where I talk about answering that question, you have how many? And other places, and then also has links to other places that I both read and write.
Okay, so that's a great place, sort of a central place to find you, and to Google your name. And
for all your Sherry Antonetti shopping, go to Chocolate for Your Brain.
All right, there you go. Well, we have plenty of time before Christmas, so I think we're good. And you have the Book of Helen out, and your upcoming book.
Well,
does it have a theme? You can give us a little preview.
Oh well, the Book of Penelope, Book of Helen was about Helen of Troy because I decided after my 8th child that I wasn't quite doing enough and decided that I should write a book. And so I wrote a historical fiction about the ultimate femme fatale historical fiction, Helen of Troy. And it does have one of those failed stories in it, so it's worth reading. I won't give it away, but it's I think you'd enjoy it. And then, answers the question, why did people not kill Helen? Because, you're very pretty, but you're still one girl, and you come with a lot of baggage, like, 10,000 Greeks hanging on our shores. So the second book is obviously the Book of Penelope, but that's still a work in progress.
We're looking forward to having you back maybe when that book is out, and we can discuss that book again. And thank you for sharing your insights on what it's like to be the mother of 10. Like I said, some people go out and are pro-life activists, and some people just live it on a daily basis, whether behind the sink or behind the computer screen, and sometimes both.
Yes. Well, I really enjoyed it.
A lot of time in the toilet, right? There's always pee. Pee happens in a life of 10 kids, right? The potty training happens.
Yes. Well, or doesn't.
Or doesn't, right? That's the real issue there. So thank you so much for coming on. I wanted to thank my listeners who've been with us through the Living the Gospel of Life, and welcome you back to another program next week where we will share with our guests what it is like in their lives and how they're living the gospel of life, as Pope John Paul has invited us, as he has encouraged all of us, that we are involved in the culture of death. We're living in the culture of death, and part of living the Catholic and the Christian life is to proclaim the gospel of life in all that we do, sometimes with words, or sometimes, as St. Francis did, without words. Certainly, a mother of 10 children and author can live the gospel of life beautifully, but there is no state in life that we can't be living the gospel of life, whether it's one child or infertility, whether it's marriage or the single life or the religious life. So I welcome you back next week when I'll have another person to interview to share about the beauty and the joy of living the gospel of life. Thank you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.